Hi everyone, I'm Christine Denning, a Master Certified Life Coach and the owner of Two Cats Coaching. Welcome to A Solo Person's Guide to ADHD. This week we are talking about grief. I know it can be a very heavy subject. I'm hoping we can have a few light moments too. I know I have a few light stories actually about some personal grief. And today we're going to talk about the big one. Why goodbye doesn't come easily. And we're going to talk about grieving the death of a loved one. So, parent, significant other. I know we're a podcast for solo people, but a lot of us do have significant others or close friends or cousins or things like that, whatever it is that is close to you. Again, I want to introduce Stacy Collins, my good longtime friend. And she is a hospice chaplain, and this was her idea that we should talk about grief, and I think it's a great one. The first episode, if you want to go back and look, that's going to be episode 13. You can go back and check. And we just kind of gave an overview of how people with ADHD and people who are single are impacted a little bit differently than the average person. Today, we're going to talk about the hard stuff. And we're going to I'd like to start by talking about your work, because this is what you do for a living. And honestly, there are parts of this I don't know a ton about. So tell me about hospice and what hospice is and what hospice does.
Yes. Yeah. So I have been a hospice chaplain with Dignity Hospice, and we go more into care centers and homes. We don't have a base hospice
facility. That's the word you want.
Yeah, facility.
Hi, we have ADHD. Can you tell?
Okay. Yes, but one of the beautiful things about hospice is just even in the name hospice, we know that it is an end of life time that we can actually acknowledge, and there's a whole care team that is with a social worker and a chaplain and a nurse and a CNA, and this whole team is there to support this person and the family, and hopefully help them be able to love this person, and for the family to be able to acknowledge that they may not have that much time left. So this is a time where those beautiful conversations, hard conversations, forgiveness can happen, and even just finding out how would this person like to go out? Are there specific prayers? Are there, just to be able to think ahead? And this is where also it can be very helpful to have thought out some of the advanced care planning, and that can also then relieve the family in that time of grief also.
I'm sure it's a difficult job, but also probably quite rewarding.
Yes. And due to some of my own losses that I'll go into in a little bit, for some reason I feel like it feels like a privilege to walk beside a family and see them really sometimes wrestle with the tough stuff, the stuff of, saying goodbye to that loved one. And we're all going to be there someday. So I think, to me, just to be part of that journey that everyone will eventually take, and hospice I think it's a gentler way to go. Some people like to think I don't want to hang around when I'm ill. I just want to go quickly. But this is kind of the easier, softer way for our loved ones to be able to get some time to say goodbye.
And that's true. And again, we're going to go into our own personal stories here in just a minute. And I've had opportunities to say goodbye and not had opportunities to say goodbye. Yes. And it's different. Tell me a little bit about how does hospice work? When do you know it's time to call in hospice? Do they contact you?
Yes. Sometimes it's the families themselves that contact their doctor, and maybe a doctor says maybe it's time for hospice. And hospice is, they're able to come onto hospice, which is covered by Medicare. Oh, nice. And when they have maybe six months or less, to live. And this, even if they get to the 6 months and you see that this person is still in decline, then that can be renewed. But the doctor is the one really to identify that. But lots of people may see that, a nurse might, the decline, or just a family member, and then they can contact different hospices, and some places already refer to specific. They have maybe several that they've worked with more often, some of the care centers.
That's really interesting. And that's cool that it's covered by Medicare. It's not
yes.
something that a family needs to come out of pocket for.
Right. And so, and then we go as a hospice team, we go into homes or assisted living facilities or skilled nursing facilities, and we're there as that extra layer of support to the medical staff that's already involved. So
that's cool. So, we wanted to take a little bit of time and talk a little bit about our own personal dealings with death. Both of us have had some pretty significant things. For me, I started young. My father died when I was 3 years old. There's a couple of pictures of him on the back corner here. My camera's a little different from normal, so you can't see him today. My mother remarried, and he was great, adopted me in the whole 9 yards. But I sort of grew up around that surrounding of grief. And my mother made the decision not to have me come to the funeral. And I understand that intellectually, and I wish I had gone. Because I don't know that I got to say a goodbye. And I don't remember my dad. So that's challenging for me sometimes. That's been sort of a lifelong struggle that I've dealt with. I feel like I've dealt with it more at this point. But it went on for a long time. My dad died when I was, my dad then, my stepdad, died when I was in my 20s. And then my mom actually lived here and moved here for that last year and a half of her life. She wasn't technically in decline, but I think she sort of knew that she certainly knew that this was going to be the last place she lived. That was something she and I talked about, which is kind of an eerie feeling, I think. And then she's been gone now for close to 30 years. So I became an orphan at the age of 34, which is not young, but not old either. But then since then, I've had a few friends pass away, but I haven't, I've been very lucky that within my family, my siblings and stuff, and I have a large family, we're all still around. So, but yeah, it's challenging. So
yeah,
and I know you've dealt with your family, unlike mine, is small.
It is.
But you've had a significant amount of loss.
Mm-hmm. I had a period of 1 year and a day, I guess it would be, where I had 3 big losses. And, we may talk about this a little bit more, but talk about cumulative grief.
Yes.
And not being able, just feeling like you're processing one and then another death happened. So my sister died at age 40 and she had 2 little boys. So that was just pretty tragic. And then 7 months later, my dad died. And then a year and a day after my sister died, my stepfather died, who had been my stepfather for 20 years.
Yeah,
so really another father figure in my life. So those 3, and then and shortly after that or within that, I was going through a separation and a divorce and finishing seminary. So it was just this accumulation of that I couldn't keep up with. I couldn't keep up with the grief. And I've had to kind of, as time has gone on, find ways to kind of circle back around and say, oh gosh, my dad is gone. My stepdad's gone. My sister, it was so big and yes. Kind of a first big loss for me of a.
And you don't have any other siblings?
No, that was my one sibling. Wow. So it's been hard, and I think so. I really have compassion for people that have these multiple losses. That whether that's, death or, in the midst of those losses were other losses. So it just adds up. It really does.
Yeah, because, and as we'll talk about, the death of a loved one isn't the only kind of grief we can have, but it does tend to be the most significant and the longest lasting because it's irreversible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I guess one of my first big questions is when somebody with ADHD has a loved one pass, how does that affect somebody with the disorder that you and I both deal with?
Yes. I think it can often, somebody at first may just be overwhelmed, because we can be overwhelmed on a good day.
Yes, that's
and
true.
So then having that come and go, what do I need to do, is a big question. People go there. They don't want to deal maybe with the feelings first. They go, what do I have to do? Sure. And then coming into that place of allowing yourself to feel. And so sometimes an early thing is it's easy to go numb or sort of say, I'm not really feeling. You can hear people say, I haven't cried yet. And that's absolutely very normal to have even that little bit of a shutdown or something. But I think ADHD folks, because of, often having multiple plates spinning and balls in the air, sure. It can feel kind of like there's either chaos or numbness. You kind of go one way or the other often. And so if there's a way to be able to just get into the present moment and be able to say what really is needed right now. And maybe it's crying, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's a hug from a friend, maybe I think we get caught in because we don't think we're that good at the executive function things like right. The list of what I need to do with this happening. That's where we often go first. And I think to be able to kind of check in with yourself more and say what is really needed right now? What do I need right now? What does my family need? What does the situation need? Right. But you're part of that situation, so don't erase yourself in it.
And I think you're right. I think the concept of, oh my gosh, now I have to deal with a coroner, deal with, burial arrangements and things like that. One of the things that I know, looking at different people in my life, I know I was always, when my mother passed, she passed very suddenly. We were not expecting it. But we always felt pretty blessed that almost everything, we knew what she wanted. She'd been very open about talking about what she wanted. And I'll tell this story because grief is hard, and so let's tell a funny story. When my mother wanted to be cremated, she had been married twice, both very happily, and had outlived both husbands. And so she wanted her ashes to be scattered in 3 places. One with each of her husbands, my dad and my stepdad. And then one section, which, they're 10 miles away, where my father is buried and my stepfather his ashes were scattered. But she also wanted a section in Minnesota where she had grown up. And I had a sister who lived there, and so she took the ashes back with her. And Mom wanted them scattered on the homestead she grew up on, which at that point was owned by one of my cousins. So that was easy, it wasn't hard to do. But so my sister arranged, and they had a little cousins gathering, and because it was wintertime, not a good winter to be getting around. They had they had a little lunch because it's Minnesota. And then after telling stories about Mom and all of that, then they realized they had to make a decision where to scatter the ashes. And they decided under the tree where the outhouse used to be. Which sounds really, people are like, what? They didn't like your mom. And no, it's actually, Mom used to go hide in the outhouse when she didn't want to do chores. And we all knew that story, that she would go and sit in the outhouse and read in order to avoid doing dishes or laundry or whatever the chore was she was trying to avoid. And And so they thought that would be a place where she would feel at home on the family homestead.
That's great.
So, you know,
Love it.
it doesn't, but it was great that we knew what she wanted. And I think that's a real benefit.
It is. And it can help with the grief process. I think if you can have these discussions ahead of time or write it down or something, because I think a lot of families in hospice, a lot of people, maybe they don't have your typical memorial or funeral, but they'll get everybody together and mom wanted just kind of a party and people would share stories. So there's not one way to grieve and there's not one way to celebrate a life.
Right.
And so finding those ways, I think that can really help in the process itself. But, sometimes we just don't have that knowledge. And then you just got to go with, hopefully your family can kind of come to some kind of an agreement. Or if you're solo and then you don't have that extended family, talk to your friends. Say, what? I don't know what exactly, but, let's brainstorm.
Yeah. And some people don't want to talk about it. I know that's something else I've experienced, that somebody I know, her husband passed of cancer after a pretty bad 18-month battle. And he never wanted to, even though he was obviously failing at a certain point, he never wanted to talk about it. And so then she was left saying, okay, what kind of a funeral do I have? What kind of a thing do I do? And she had to make those decisions because they were decisions he just didn't feel he could make. And I always feel like that's unfortunate, but,
yes,
so it is what it is.
Everybody
deals with these things differently.
Yes, absolutely. And I think our society sometimes runs from that. Although I have heard that some of the newer generations coming up, they're looking at death, that we all die. Sometimes we learn from the next generation coming up to face something. True. And I think that there's those, without going into detail, but the death cafes and things like that, where questions are put out there to be able to face our own loss and the fact that we'll lose everyone at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and even people who are partnered, for those of us who are single, if you outlive your partner, you're now single too.
Yes.
And that's for instance what happened to my mother. It's happened to both of my sisters.
And usually one goes before the other.
Yeah.
It's rare you go together, and that happens too. But
so again, for somebody with ADHD and especially someone who's single and doesn't have that built-in support at home, however, we're the independent type, and it's hard sometimes to ask for help. Are there ways that we can do that? I mean, and where do things like hospice or other support teams come in for that? Can they actually help you, like with making the funeral arrangements?
Yes, and we have, after a loss, also we have bereavement counselors that can work with you for, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 15 months after the loss for multiple family members if it's needed. Mm-hmm. So I think processing that, but even prior to that, the social worker or chaplain, it's part of our work if someone wants that, to be able to help them with that. So in that system, there really is a support to say, let's sit down and really figure out a way to honor this person, and that, and I would say also just, if you feel totally alone, those friends that really are able to just listen and not give like, this is what you need to do to fix this or do this and that, right. But those friends that are willing to just be with you as you're crying or as you are frustrated or whatever it might be, to find those people. Sometimes we feel like we're a burden to others, but it's to me, to be there for friends in that way is a gift to me, to be able to do that.
That's great. I love that. So another issue that often comes up is the grief fog. That, as we are in, especially that most active part of grief, when the death has been more imminent. So what are some suggestions as to how people handle that intense period?
Yes, I think especially not to, make the big decisions or life changes or the move right then and be able to just kind of, because if you're already in a fog, you want to let that, some of that burn off, and that, and for each person that might be different, but I think knowing you don't have to do it all right away. And we certainly learned during COVID, you can put off the memorial. You can, even for a year, and maybe that's even in certain families and for certain people that may even be better. You have some time. You can look through photos. You can, nothing has to be rushed. And then for some people, to know, gosh, in order to move forward, this needs to happen sooner than later. So again, not a one size fits all.
Well, and I think sometimes, and especially if you are the only person or the only single person dealing with a death in your family, say a parent, for example, there are unfortunately big decisions that have to be made. Are you going to sell a property? Are you going to move a surviving spouse out of a home and into a care facility? Are you going to, how do you just simply split up the stuff if you have siblings? All of those things can be wrought with family dynamics.
Yes, and often it can fall on the more either responsible one or the one that just will do it. And that doesn't mean it's the non-ADHD person. Sometimes that's the person that can go into hyper focus mode in those times, and or the one that is able to feel and walk through this. And again, we know there are big gifts with having ADHD because it allows us sometimes different pathways to the same place. And so sometimes you're the one that the family goes, oh, this person will help us. They'll do this or something. So I think, but it's important to talk to everybody and share that load if possible. And I mean, a lot of the funeral homes and will also help. They have people to help talk through some things too. And, there are, that can, help if you're feeling like, oh gosh, I got to go it alone.
One other thing that I think is an important part of this is not only dealing with our loved ones' mortality, but dealing with our own possible mortality. We're all going to die sometime.
Yes, yes.
And so what are things that we can do? And especially as somebody who's single, I don't have somebody who's automatically going to inherit my stuff or be there for me as I hit either those last stages, if I have a disease or something like that, or, God forbid I get hit by a car. How do I make sure that I have things set up so that things aren't just dumped on my loved ones?
That is good. I think, again, being able to do some of the advanced care planning and writing about it is wonderful. If you can get to that where you say what would be a meaningful nonprofit to donate to, or what are some of the, to know that, even though, and I don't have children, even though I don't have children, where would I like to see some life and to give back? And so thinking about that ahead of time. And some people even say, at age 18, it's not too soon to do this kind of work, because you don't know. You never know. It's hard to go into it, but if you can just begin that process with just what means something to me, what do I imagine I'd like to see, and for my own death, what would I really like, and getting that to your friends and family, and or having a place where you tell somebody this is where it's located.
I think that's some of it too. Is like, do people know where I store my important papers?
Yes.
Do people know what, if I get sick, what I would like? What if it's something sudden? do they know how to find those things? I think it's important to, it's so hard to have these conversations, but I think it's important to do that.
Yes.
For me personally, I mean, I've talked to a handful of friends, you being one of them, one of my sisters. And she and I've had long discussions on this because she and I feel a lot of the same way about this. And of course, we've been through the same death experiences in our family, in our own family. And then I've talked to some of my nieces and nephews because if I survive all of those people, they're probably still going to be around when I'm gone. So, and I have to admit, I don't have all my paperwork in order. That's one of those things I keep inching away at it. And then I get distracted and busy.
Oh, yeah. But I think, again, it's like this, and that's where, some people will say to me, you work for hospice, isn't that sad? Isn't that hard? I think there's something very life-giving to facing death, because that's a truth in our lives. We're not getting out of this alive. And I think it can be very freeing. It's like accepting our own death can bring us life. Yes. And one of the things with hospice is we help people to live the life they want to live until they die. And so
I love that.
I think,
say that again.
What did I say?
People want to live the life.
Yes, to be able to live fully and live the life they want to live until they die, and yes. As they die, even being able to do that on their terms. And again, we don't always have, we don't have control over maybe the when we die, but how we go through that. And
I think another important thing is, before we get to that point, to make sure that we are treating the loved ones in our lives with no regrets. Again, my mother died when I was just 34, and she and I were quite close. So, and I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, that must be so hard." Of course it was. It was very hard. But I know there are two things I know. And one was that I didn't have anything unsaid with my mother. We had a good relationship. She knew I loved her. I know she loved me. There was no what ifs between us. And the other thing, and this is challenging, but is something she and I are the ones. I was the child to whom she often had these kind of discussions. She had different kinds of discussions with other siblings, and I wasn't her executor. My brother was, because that was more his wheelhouse, not mine. You don't, if you can avoid it, you don't hand the executor keys to your child who's undiagnosed ADHD. Although my nephew is one of the ones I'm looking at for that, and he's way more ADHD than I am. but he's also an attorney, so there's that. But that she was ready to go, and that's a very interesting discussion to have with your parent, who at that point isn't exhibiting any. I mean, she'd had her share of health issues, but it wasn't like she was in hospice or something at the time. But she said, I have lived, she said, I'm not saying I want to go, but when the time comes, I'm good. I have already done the things I wanted to do. That
must bring you great comfort.
Yes. And I think we had that discussion within less than a year of her death. So when it happened, it was, again, not easy, because it's never easy. And my mother died of a blood clot, so it was an instant death. There was no goodbye. The other thing that gives me comfort is that she was not alone. She actually had a nurse. She lived in one of those extended nursing facilities. She was still independent, but she called for some help that night because she was not feeling well. And so she was literally talking to a nurse, and her face just went up, and she was gone. And so if she could have been saved, she would have been, because the nurse literally, grabbed her, started CPR, pulled the cord. The paramedics were there in like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It was very quick. But she was gone. And although that is hard, on the other hand, I know she really didn't want to linger in a nursing home. So I'm very grateful that we didn't have to deal with it. Yeah. But that's why I don't know as much about hospice, as we didn't deal with that with her. We didn't have to. She was here 1 minute and gone the next.
Yes. And sometimes people are in hospice and they think and they believe they're ready to go, and some reason it doesn't happen like that. Yes. And sometimes it does. And there's, we'll have questions like, is there something that would help you be able to let go more? Or is there a way, whatever that might be, maybe talking to someone that you haven't talked to in a while and all those right. things. That's part of our work.
You hear about the people hanging on until somebody gets to fly in.
Yes, exactly. Or yes. Until I'm going to get through, some people that are adamant, I'm going to get through this Christmas or this holiday. Yep. And they do sometimes and sometimes not. Again, it's never one size fits all.
Yes. Wow, this has been powerful and challenging. Trying to think if there's anything else we haven't covered. I think one thing that I am thinking about is that, so as you're going through this grieving period after your loved one has passed, how do you sort of reintegrate back into your regular life? When do you go back to work, and how do you deal with, the pressures of your regular life once you are past the first portion of your grieving period?
I think everybody is different, but I think listening to yourself and maybe finding ways to know this is how I'm going to still take care of myself, even when I've got to get back to the office or get back to work. I'm going to come back and take a bubble bath, or I'm going to do this or that. Some self-care things just built in to life in this new way. And the other thing, I think, is even prior to that, and I know we're going to get into this in another episode, but more about like even these rituals of maybe saying I'm ready to enter back into the world more. Maybe there's some kind of way or ritual you can have, whether that's lighting a candle or one time a friend and I went and we took all these different little leaves and flowers that were on the ground, and we put them in a little ball and put them down there was a river. And so we just let them float down the river. And that is sort of letting go of some things or grief, or saying and welcoming in then the new life that's coming. So I think, being able to name it, and that you are changed for life with this loss.
Yes.
And, but it can be I think the ritual part of it, is a way to just name that I will never be the same. Your life touched me, or this job touched me that I worked in for so long, and now I'm letting go of it. Whatever it is, right. That we find those ways to release and welcome in the new.
That sounds fabulous. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. I think I think we've sort of been through. Thank you so much for coming and talking about this. A reminder that if you are finding yourself dealing with any kind of especially intense grief, if you're really struggling, please do reach out to a mental health professional or your doctor. If it's urgent, call 911 or 988 in the United States for medical help. And know that you're not alone. Take the time to take care of yourself. It's really important. There are, and that doing grief right is not really an option. You will do grief the way you do grief. And as somebody with ADHD, that may look different from other people around you, and that's okay. We are who we are. We're going to talk next time about pet grief, especially for those of us who are single and ADHD, but not just us. Anybody who is a pet lover, they're in some ways sort of our practice grief, because their lives are shorter than ours. So it's much more, unless you have a parent. But more likely that they will pass before us. In some ways, it's a way to practice how to grieve these bigger griefs for when we do lose our human loved ones.
Yes.
So, again, I'm Christine Dunning. Thank you much for coming. A reminder to, if you are interested in these episodes, do check these out. We're going to have 5 of these total. Remember to subscribe, hit like, and share these with other people who may be dealing with grief issues in their life. And again, we'll see you next time as we talk about pets. Thanks for coming.